This started out as a 6-inch water flow test hole that Mr. Dan Blankenship drilled 60 to 70 of these on this end of the island. He picked each and every site using dowsing or divining rods. He's a water witcher. And these just happen to be borehole number 10. But when he hit voids at 140 and 160 feet that were 5 feet high, he decided to pump compressed air down into these voids. And he discovered some things that he brought up at 140 feet that he felt should not naturally be 140 feet underneath the ground. He brought up links of chain, bits of brass, bits of concrete, spruce and oak, things that should not naturally be that deep underneath the ground. So with that, this became his point of interest, and he dubbed it 10X, and it's been called that ever since. Now, as it exists today, what he decided to do was bring in 3 oil rail cars from the city. And they hand excavated this area out just under 8 feet across. They brought in these oil rail cars from the city. They brought in a crane. They cut the ends of them off. They hoisted them up with the crane, and gravity fed them down into the ground, hand excavating around them as they went, welding one to the other as they went down. Now, they bound up at about 90 feet, and that's as far as he could get. So as it exists today, from surface level to 90 feet, it's the 3 oil rail cars, just under 8 feet across. From 90 feet to 181 feet, embedded in the anhydrite bedrock, it's reinforced concrete about 15 inches thick. At 181 feet is where Mr. Blankenship kind of ran out of money. So it's still the original drilled hole down through the anhydrite bedrock to 235 feet, where he found a cavern that opens up 235 feet below the ground. Now, this hole that he drilled down through the anhydrite is 27 inches across, but it's not completely cylindrical like this caisson is here. That anhydrite, as I said, is very hard, so when the drill went through it, it had a bit of a wobble to it. So that drill hole has quite an oblong shape to it. So when the divers go down in here, you gotta go this way, because if you go this way, you get stuck, and you drag all of that anhydrite down with you as you go. So by the time you get to the bottom, you can't see your hand in front of your face. Now, Dan did several dives into the bottom of this chasm at 235 feet. Not a trained diver at all. He did them back in the early 70s. You may have seen his dive suit that he used on display in the interpretive center. And if you have a keen eye and you didn't catch it the first time, you might want to take a look when you go back. Dan was a frugal sort. He didn't have a lot of money to work with. So when his airline wore out on his mask, on his dive suit, he just simply went out in Jane's garden and got a piece of water hose and used that as his airline to dive to 235 feet below ground. And he dove on air, not on trimix like they do today. When he did his successful dives, he also had video cameras down there. Now, this is 1970s technology, of course, but the video images seem to show, and what Dan said he felt he saw was 2 or 3 chests down at the bottom, some tools leaning up against the wall, and what appeared to be human remains at the bottom of this shaft. Now, at one point in time, the workers who were up here monitoring the video screen at that point in time during the dive happened to notice a skeletal hand float across the screen. So very defined evidence that there was, or for some of us who are true believers, still are human remains down at the bottom of 10X. Now, the sonar images that we had done 5-6 years ago seem to reaffirm everything that Dan said he saw. It also showed that there are 2 tunnels, one leading in from the ocean to 10X and one leading out to the money pit. But when we had John Chatterton here, who's truly the world's best diver, there's no doubt about that whatsoever, and he did his successful dives to the bottom of 10X, he couldn't seem to find any of those man-made features at the bottom of this shaft, and he felt that everything down there was natural. So it was a very disappointing day here for the crew on the island, but for those of us true believers and those of us in the Blankenship camp, we still felt that there still wasn't an X through 10X. We wondered if there were still more questions than answers. Of course, the only thing left to do with 10X is to explore it in the dry. And in order to do that, we have 2 really big engineering stumbling blocks moving forward. The first being that this shaft floods full of water, that rises and lowers every single day with the tide because it's salt water. So if you're going to pump it out, you're pumping out the ocean. So where are you going to put it? And is the entire thing going to cave in on itself because it's been under pressure for so long? So those are the big engineering stumbling blocks moving forward. But it's interesting to note that of the over 1,000 boreholes that have been put down over Oak Island, all over this island over the last 224 years, all of them but 3 bring up fresh water. Only 3 sites bring up salt. The Money Pit site, 10X, and the Cave-In Pit, which is just down here towards Smith's Cove, are the only 3 spots that have brought up salt water. So a very defined connection between these 3 sites and the open ocean. So for those of us who knew Dan well, and for most of us we know now, of course, that Dan knows all the answers, and he doesn't need us to tell him that he was right, but he was indeed. For those of us who knew him well, Dan, you were right. From here, we're just going to mention these 2 things here, this monument that's